Hey folks, Will here again with Happily Ever Outdoors. So in this video, we're going to talk about how to build a fire kit that you can count on to never leave you out in the cold. So keep watching. So what exactly is a fire kit? Well, quite simply, it is the basic items that you'll need to get a fire started. Now, of course, there's going to be a lot of debate over what exactly should go into a fire kit, but it really comes down to three key components. Number one is going to be your ignition source or sources. That's going to be what gives you that first spark or flame to get things going. Number two is going to be your tinder. Those are going to be these small pieces of flammable material that you use to build your fire off of. And number three is going to be the container or containers that you use to hold the items in your kit. We're going to take a look at a basic fire kit that I put together. Now, before we look at the kit as a whole, we're going to talk about the three key components that I mentioned, with number one being your ignition source or sources. I also think this is a really good point to mention the key principle of redundancy. Redundant means either a repetition or a duplicate, and in the outdoors, especially when it comes to like survival gear and things of that nature, redundancy is important so that if you lose one item in your kit or one fails, breaks, something like that, you have an alternate. You can see right here, this is going to be my primary ferro rod. This is a ferro rod from Titan Survival. It's a good oversized ferro rod. We also have a magnesium block fire starter, not one of my personal favorites, but these will work. That does have a striking surface right there, as well as the magnesium, which you can shave off to help start a fire, and that also gives me an extra striker if I need it. Of course, I also have a good old-fashioned disposable Bic lighter, and there's no shame in carrying one of these. In fact, it's just plain smart to have one. If I'm ever in a situation where my tinder is not the best, the conditions aren't the best, I might be able to get a fire started with this lighter that I couldn't get started with anything else. A quick note with disposable lighters: if you're storing them in your kit for a long period of time, you're going to want to check on them occasionally, because these will actually gas out and they'll lose the fuel inside of them just from sitting around. It'll evaporate out. Now, of course, in order to effectively use ferro rods or magnesium blocks and to make a lot of good natural tinders like bark scrapings, you're going to need a good hard scraping surface. Right here we have a really sturdy, like overbuilt ferro rod striker from 4 Directions Bushcraft. Got a really nice hard steel striking surface right there, an Osage orange handle. This is a really good striker. This is, again, a really good primary go-to tool. We also have a small scraper that's here on our magnesium block in case we were to lose this one, and I've also included a small knife in this kit. Now, this is a Mora Eldris. It doesn't necessarily have to be this knife, but this is a good knife for a smaller kit like this because it's a fixed blade, but it will fit inside of a compact kit. You could also go with a small folding knife. That would work just fine. It doesn't have to be an expensive knife, but you just never know. I always carry a primary knife with me. I don't go in the woods without a larger knife. It just doesn't happen. But you never know what could happen. Given the fact that a good cutting tool is such an important part of being able to make tinder and just fire making in general out in the woods, I wouldn't go out without an extra one in my fire kit. By the way, the particular knife I've chosen also has a hard 90-degree spine on it, so I could use this to strike a ferro or to make fine scrapings and shavings as well. Of course, this is by no means an exhaustive list of all the ignition sources out there. So if there's something else that you guys particularly love to use to get that initial spark or flame, feel free to tell us in the comments below. So moving on, let's talk a little bit about tinder. Now again, what tinder is basically dry, flammable material that's going to give you that little bit of a sustainable burn after you get that initial spark or flame, so that you can use other natural tinders and small kindling that you find in your surrounding area. One that I am particularly fond of is fat wood. This comes from pine trees, and it's really preeminent kind of in the southeastern United States. You see this a lot, but what this really is resin-dense pine wood. It's completely saturated with pine sap. So this is going to be highly flammable, and it's got a really long sustained burn, because once it starts burning, which it takes a spark very easily, all of that resin starts to kind of ooze out of it, and it just continues to burn. And it's a natural material, which is great too. Essentially, in order to use this, all you're going to have to do is take your scraper or maybe the back of your knife, and you can use that to make very fine shavings, which will take a spark very easily. You can also cut it into smaller strips or even break it down into chunks. It's waterproof, and it will actually ignite even if it's wet. Next, we've got a couple different things kind of bundled up together because I had them in a baggie together. Cotton balls, which is something that everybody has around their house, right? It's really, really easy to get a spark to take on these. You can pull them apart like that and kind of fluff them up, and they'll spark really easily. Now, just like this, they don't really have a very long burn. It's pretty fast and they'll go out. Some people like to soak cotton balls in petroleum jelly, and that works really well too. That's not something I particularly like to carry just because of the mess, but it does work well, and it's something that's really cheap and it's really easy you can make from home. Dryer lint. This is just the lint that I pulled out of the filter in my dryer. This is the stuff off your clothes, and this will actually take a flame pretty well too. Again, not a real long burn, but as long as you keep this dry, it'll take a spark very easily. Something that's a little more natural that I find around the area where I live is cattail fluff. And in the same way, much like the dryer lint and the cotton, it'll take a spark really, really easily. It won't burn very long, but it will take a really easy spark. It's very important though, especially with this, that you keep it completely dry or it will not work. And one downside to the cattail fluff, as you can imagine, is that it's messy, so you got to keep it contained. As soon as you pull it apart, those little fibers will try to blow away, just like they were designed to do right out in the wild. One other thing I have here, this is basically just some heavyweight paper. This was a packing material I got in a few different packages. Maybe you've seen this before. And this is something, it's not really going to take a spark easily. If you have a lighter, you can definitely get that to ignite, no problem. But it does work well. If you're using a ferro rod, you can get a spark going with one of these other materials, and then that's something else you can kind of throw on there. As long as you have everything else kind of staged and ready to build your fire, it'll give you a little bit of that initial burst of heat. Not a very long burn, but it'll take very easily. Lastly, not necessarily something I would recommend using all the time, just because it does put out some pretty noxious fumes. I've got a little bit of duct tape here that I wrapped around a wooden dowel. I could peel this off, and what works real well is you can kind of use it to make a little nest for your tinder. Put the tinder inside there and then spark that, and this will actually get a really good burn, if you believe it or not. So duct tape really does fix everything. So duct tape will give you a little bit longer, kind of a sustained burn when you're using it in conjunction with other tinders. But again, I would really only use this for emergencies, because it does put out some pretty nasty black smoke that I'm sure is full of all kinds of chemicals that you don't want to be breathing. All right, guys, we're going to talk about the last key component, which is going to be your container or containers. Now, of course, the first container you have is going to be the actual pouch or bag or whatever that holds your whole fire kit together. It could be a tactical style pouch like this, or it could be maybe a more traditional leather or canvas pouch or bag, or perhaps it could be some kind of a waterproof container. I mean, it could be a waterproof Tupperware for that matter, depending on what your particular application was. But the key things to consider are, number one, it's got to be something that's sturdy. It's got to hold up well. You want it to be easy for you to pack in the particular kit that you're going to be taking. And you'll probably want it to have some kind of organizational features inside, just so your stuff's not all just kind of thrown in and mixed together and tough to dig through. Because that could certainly create problems for you. Let's say you're trying to get fire going and your hands were particularly cold, or maybe it was already dark outside, or maybe you're doing it in the rain and you don't want to have your kit all pulled out and everything getting all wet for a long time. So you want to be able to keep it organized so you know what is where. Now, this particular pouch that we're looking at right here is the 3V Gear Sidekick Utility Pouch. This is a pouch I've actually purchased for a couple different things. I had got one in one of my subscription boxes and I really liked it, so I've actually ordered a couple since then, because it's a good size. It's big enough without being too big, works for a lot of different things, and it's got some really, really good organizational features on the inside. You can also see it has the MOLLE attachments on the front, as well as the straps on the back. So if you were putting this onto a tactical backpack or a vest, or even just your regular pack, you can attach it quite easily. It has really sturdy double zippers, which I like, and it also has a drain hole on the bottom in case any water were to get inside of this. By the way, this is a water-resistant pouch, really, but not waterproof. So depending on where you're taking your fire kit, you might want to consider a waterproof pouch or something like this. I would either put it inside of a waterproof bag or put it inside of a Ziploc bag inside my pack, so I knew that this stuff would not get wet. Okay, now why don't we go ahead and open this up and take a look inside. So you can see, as soon as you open up this pouch, we've got a lot of organization going on here. It has these nice loops on this side, so you can keep all your items sorted. And there's room here. I was able to put my little Tinder kit in here. You didn't see this case yet because we're talking about containers now. You can find good little cases like this. There's plenty of places you can order them online. But this particular one here is just two pieces that snap together. There's no hinge, so I put a rubber band around it, and it doesn't have a rubber seal on it to make it waterproof. So I always keep it inside of a little Ziploc bag that I came across. This was just, I don't even remember where I got it. It was some kind of packaging for something. So whenever you see stuff like that, when you buy a new piece of gear, think about what you might be able to use it for and hold on to it. But I also threw my Bic lighter inside there because you may or may not know that if a Bic lighter gets wet, gets submerged in water, it's not gonna work. It'll ruin the fuel inside there. Now this pouch also has a bigger little slot right there, and you can see inside here, I just got my magnesium block fire starter in there because there's not a good spot for it over here. And then all my extra tinder, I keep in a Ziploc bag. So I have this smaller little container, which is kind of my go-to that I work out of. And then I also have this Ziploc bag to keep some extra stuff in there. Even if you don't carry a lot of extra tinder in your fire kit, carry a gallon Ziploc bag. This is something I don't really see people talk about at all when it comes to fire kit. Think about it. If you're out somewhere and it's wet and you're taking all that time and you're going around and you're trying to find dry tinder, let's say you were on a hiking trip and you're lost and you've been out there for days and you've used all the tinder that you had with you, you collect that dry stuff. Well, now you need a means to keep it dry. Ziploc bag doesn't take hardly any space in your kit whatsoever. Something as simple as this could make a huge difference in an emergency situation. So this is just one example of a basic fire kit. You may want to go smaller than this. In that case, you might reduce your redundancies a little bit. You might not carry as many fire starters, as much tinder, or you might decide to go bigger than this. Of course, if you do want to build a kit that's really similar to this, I'll include links to as much of the gear as I can in the description below, so you can check it out for yourself. But the important thing is to remember those 3 key components.
Number 1.
Your ignition source or sources.
Number 2.
Your tinder.
And number 3.
Your container or containers to hold it all together. Alright folks, I hope that this tutorial on how to build a fire kit was helpful to you. In the future, we may go more in-depth with specific videos on how to select tinder, how to find it out in the woods, how to pick the best fire starters, all that good stuff. As always, if you have any questions about the content we covered in this video, feel free to drop that in the comments below so we can get back to you. Also, if you've got any tips or tricks of your own that you want to share, we'd love to hear from you as well. If you enjoyed this video, do us a favor and give it a thumbs up. And if you're not subscribed to our channel already, I hope you'll consider doing so today so you can keep seeing more videos like this. Until next time, stay happy and stay outdoors.